Chapter 2648, Return from Despair. Chapter 2648, Return from Despair. The Z-Way segmentum was once again enveloped by starlight. Yi Futian stood beneath the vast starlight and seemingly became one with the Z-Way segmentum. From the outer realms, a mighty army had arrived. They were none other than the cultivators from the divine prefecture. Wang Shao, now Tianyan the Great, appeared in front of the army. He was surrounded by divine light, and his god's might was overbearing. His eyes flashed with golden divine light as he looked down at everything around him. Behind him were cultivators from the few major ancient god clans. All of them were under his command now. This time, they would surely eradicate the Z-Way segmentum. The cultivators arrived at the outer region of the Z-Way segmentum. After a few years, they came again. In the past, their armies were defeated here, and they were forced to retreat. Yi Futian shocked everyone in the divine prefecture with his ever-growing ability. His status back then had already posed a threat to the ancient god clans. Now Tianyan the Great had returned. He would take care of their worries. They would plunder everything in the Z-Way segmentum. Tianyan the Great stopped outside the segmentum. He lowered his head and looked down. His figure was surrounded by God's might, and he was peerless. He took a step forward, and his figure grew larger, transforming into a 100 zhang tall god. Sky Tremor, which he wielded, similarly grew larger, and it emanated shocking God's might. The power demonstrated by Sky Tremor now was not at all on the same level as that when the real Wang Shao wielded it before. Tianyan the Great, who had transformed into a god, lowered his head and looked over the Z-Way segmentum. Terrifying flames burned in his gigantic eyes. It was as though two beams of frightening light were directly emitted on the light screen protecting the segmentum. The light screen was on the verge of being penetrated with just his gaze. The cultivators who stood behind Tianyan the Great felt their hearts tremble in fear. The might of an actual emperor was beyond their imagination. No wonder the gap to becoming a great emperor was so tough that countless cultivators failed to break through it. If they did, they would become a god, an immortal existence. Even though the current Tianyan the Great paled into insignificance compared to his former self, he was still a great emperor who managed to return to the world with the flesh of Wang Shao. His ability was powerful, and it was not something other cultivators could fathom. Even near-deity figures were like ants before him. Only real great emperors could suppress him now. In the Z-Way segmentum, Yi Futian also saw the figure of Tianyan the Great. The 100 zhang tall figure of the god was extremely majestic, like a deity whose order was irresistible. He looked down on the segmentum with a gaze of disdain. The divine light emanating from the eyes of Tianyan the Great was enough to kill Yi Futian. This scene caused Yi Futian to feel somewhat helpless. Could the Z-Way segmentum resist the other party? Why do you put yourself through such a futile struggle? I come from the ancient age, and I have no intention of committing a massacre here, Tianyan the Great said plainly. You should remove the seal voluntarily and embrace your death. That will spare everyone in the Z-Way segmentum. His tone was scornful. Tianyan the Great suggested that Yi Futian should give up resisting. The latter should remove the seal and willingly be killed. Clearly, Tianyan the Great had set his mind on killing Yi Futian. He did not lie to the latter either. He was too prideful even to bother deceiving Yi Futian. Yi Futian was but an ant to him. Even with Yi Futian's extraordinary talent, he was but an ant when faced with the great emperor. He did not amount to anything. Yi Futian's emotions were stirred. Tianyan the Great asked him to embrace his death? Such was the mentality of a great emperor. The other great emperors most likely also shared a similar way of thinking. They wouldn't take all the proud sons of heaven seriously. For the great emperors, those talented youths were but ants. However, Yi Futian would never accept his death willingly without trying to resist first. Yi Futian shut his eyes tightly. His body turned ethereal as he transformed into an illusory figure. A terrifying aura permeated the starry sky of the Z-Way segmentum as countless stars lit up at the same time. Yi Futian's illusory figures appeared on every single star. A menacing aura burst forth. In the heavens above, Tianyan the Great, who had transformed into a god, stared at the scene below with a cold expression. He scanned the Z-Way segmentum with a look of disdain as he scoffed, "You are but a mayfly attempting to topple a tree. You are seeking your death." As he said this, he raised his sky tremor, and a shocking wave gushed forth. The shock waves materialized into tremoring pulses that swept towards Yi Futian. Tianyan the Great swung sky tremor downwards. The sky beneath his feet shattered, and everything in the way of the attack turned into dust. Myriads of tremoring pulses blasted the protective shield of the Z-Way segmentum. A shocking sound reverberated in space as the entire Z-Way segmentum shook. All the cultivators in the segmentum were appalled. They frantically looked up to the sky. Were they under yet another attack? The cultivators from Z-Way Imperial Palace also felt their hearts tremble violently. Their bodies were shivering as the ground vibrated. Fortunately, the buildings were very stable. Otherwise, they would have collapsed due to the shock. "Palace Lord," the cultivators mumbled as they raised their heads and stared at the sky. With a flash, Hua Jiyu charged towards where Yi Futian was. Her eyes glistened with tears. Despite many years having passed and many things having changed, the other party still refused to let Yi Futian off the hook. The great emperor had come with his imperial arm and intended to eradicate all of them. The protective shield around the Z-Way segmentum was shattering. It was as though the sky was collapsing, and everything was on the verge of being reduced to nothingness. The attack of Tianyan the Great could not be stopped at all. This time, Tianyan the Great bestowed genuine despair on the cultivators of the segmentum. "Milady," shouted Lord Qin. He had promised Yi Futian that he would escort Hua Jiyu away from here. However, she was also a 2 tribulation-level cultivator now. Lord Qin couldn't stop her. She had traveled a long distance and was charging up towards the sky in an instant. "Let her be," said Gu Donglu to the side. If the Z-Way segmentum was truly destroyed and his little brother was killed, Hua Jiyu would not choose to live either. Not long ago, the couple had made a promise to reach the peak of the world of cultivation together. No one had expected that doomsday would befall the Z-Way segmentum in the blink of an eye. No one could stop Tianyan the Great at all. An aura of despair loomed over Z-Way Imperial Palace. Aside from hopelessness, everyone felt enraged as they raised their heads to observe the battle in the sky. "Master," exclaimed Little Ling and the others as they took to the sky. "Stay put." Lord Qin immediately forged a starry domain and sealed off the space. He would not allow the youngsters to die in vain. "Let us go," shouted Fong Xian as he turned around and glared at Lord Qin. Lord Qin stared at him silently, but he did not do as they wished. They were the kindling of hope. Many people in Z-Way Imperial Palace got teary-eyed as they observed the event. Were things truly going to end like this? This was such a sudden destruction. They were not ready for it at all. In the heavens above, the god looked down. Yi Futian's aura was unstable, and there was blood oozing out from the corner of his mouth. The protective shield forged with the stars in the Z-Way segmentum was shattered. It could not withstand even a hit and was directly smashed into pieces by the imperial arm of Tianyan the Great. Tianyan the Great had personally come. He was on a totally different level than Wang Shao. The members of the ancient god clans, who were behind Tianyan the Great, observed everything from high above. They were delighted. Without the protective barrier of Z-Way, Yi Futian had no chance of survival. Today, the Z-Way segmentum was doomed to be destroyed. Yi Futian was destined to die here too. Finally, everything was about to come to an end. However, Tianyan the Great was not in a hurry to kill Yi Futian. As he stood high and mighty like a god, he looked down at the figure of the latter. Tianyan the Great appeared majestic and superior. He was God. He had heard rumors about Yi Futian owning many imperial-level items. He might not have a use for those items, but they would surely come in handy for the Wang family. "Come and embrace your death," ordered Tianyan the Great as he looked down on Yi Futian. He said, "This is your last chance. You should be honored to be killed by me personally." So he would die in the hands of Tianyan the Great? Yi Futian felt powerless and despair. He closed his eyes and communicated with the will of Great Emperor Z-Way. He seemed to no longer be himself. His spiritual soul merged with the stars, and he unleashed his power of the Great Path to his maximum. He resonated with the stars and became one with them. Yi Futian was no longer himself. Instead, he was part of the starry sky. A gigantic phantasm appeared. It was none other than the illusory figure of great Emperor Ziwei. He was dissatisfied. Humph! Tianyan the Great looked down with a look of condescension. Even now, the other party did not know their strength and was stubbornly persisting. Since you are so ignorant about your current situation, I will send you to your death, said Tianyan the Great. Be destroyed together with this starry sky. As he said this, a beam of light that was even more brilliant than before shone in the vast space. A destructive tremoring pulse swept down. He raised Sky Tremor in his hand once more. The god lifted his divine hammer, intending to destroy Ziwei. Yi Futian made a wish. Years ago, the will of the great emperor awakened and helped me break the seal on the imperial arm and destroyed the heaven-tempering divine matrix. Now, will the great emperor awaken to protect the Ziwei segmentum from being destroyed? A consciousness enveloped the various stars. The next moment, the destructive tremoring pulses from Sky Tremor, as well as the world-destroying divine light, came crashing down. It was even more terrifying than the previous attack. Unparalleled destructive power rained down. Everyone in Ziwei Imperial Palace fell into despair. Right then, an even more dazzling divine halo lit up in the starry sky. It was as though all the stars were shining. "All right," answered a voice from the void. Then there was a terrifying sound. The tremoring pulses that could destroy everything crashed onto the defenses of the Ziwei segmentum. This time, it did not shatter the defensive light shroud. The destructive god's might slammed down as though it was about to destroy the entire segmentum. However, it was blocked. Many cracks appeared on the light shroud, but the destructive divine light could not penetrate it. It merely kept attacking as its might gradually faded. Finally, the divine light was shattered and dissipated on the surface of the light shroud. Tianyan the Great and the various cultivators were stunned at this scene. The light shroud wasn't destroyed? Whose voice was that just now? Amidst the destructive attacks, they heard a voice utter a single word. Who was this voice responding to? They were not the only ones who heard it. At this moment, all living beings in the Ziwei segmentum heard this word. Yi Futian naturally also heard it. The various stars shone brighter and brighter. Their light was scorching. An unparalleled god's might emanated from the various stars in the sky. In the heavens above, an illusory figure appeared in the vast starry sky. It was an ethereal and domineering figure of a god. His long hair fluttered in the wind. It was as though his entire figure was formed from the stars. It is the Great Emperor. The Great Emperor has returned. Great Emperor Ziwei has returned. When the entire Ziwei segmentum saw this dazzling and miraculous scene, many members actually could not help but kneel on the ground. Tears of joy flowed down their faces. They had thought that the Ziwei segmentum would once again face another fatal catastrophe. They never imagined that after Tianyan the Great was reborn, the Ziwei segmentum would be in peril. The former wanted to destroy them. However, at this very moment, Great Emperor Ziwei had returned. It was Great Emperor Ziwei. Everyone in Ziwei Imperial Palace felt their hearts throbbing as they gazed in awe at the scene in the sky above. Great Emperor Ziwei had returned. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2649. A Tragic Great Emperor. Chapter 2649. A tragic great emperor. Yi Futian's heart was similarly throbbing. His consciousness also formed a phantasm. He looked towards the god figure and shouted, "Great Emperor!" He never imagined that Great Emperor Ziwei would hear his summons and descend upon the world in this moment of despair. They were saved from the valley of despair. Great Emperor Ziwei's ethereal face looked towards Yi Futian as he said, "You inherited the will of Ziwei and my teachings. Shouldn't you be calling me master?" Yi Futian had inherited the will of Ziwei and was now the faith of the members of the Ziwei segmentum. The stars in the sky were his to command. He could also rely on the will of Ziwei. Indeed, he could be considered a disciple of Great Emperor Ziwei. Although this was the first time the two of them had met each other, it was within reason for Yi Futian to call him master. Master! Yi Futian called out as he bowed. Great Emperor Ziwei's ethereal face revealed a smile, and he seemed reassured. He said, "After having perished for so many years, I am relieved to be able to take in a disciple after my will awakened." Clearly, Great Emperor Ziwei greatly approved of Yi Futian. Otherwise, he would not have taken him in as a disciple now. His voice could be heard across the entire Ziwei segmentum. All the cultivators present could hear him clearly. He was Great Emperor Ziwei, the master of the Ziwei segmentum. This was his world. How could the cultivators of Ziwei not recognize his voice and will? From this day forth, Yi Futian will inherit the will of Ziwei and become the master of the Ziwei segmentum, declared Great Emperor Ziwei. All the cultivators in the segmentum felt their hearts tremble. Great Emperor Ziwei had returned to recognize Yi Futian as his successor officially. He declared that Yi Futian would inherit the segmentum. The members of the Ziwei segmentum had long acknowledged Yi Futian and viewed him as their faith before this. However, he had seized Ziwei Imperial Palace by force back then, so his claim over it was debatable. However, from now on, he was officially the master of the Ziwei segmentum. "Master!" Yi Futian cried out. He had a bad premonition. His summoning the will of Great Emperor Ziwei this time might cause it to dissipate after. The latter's words sounded more like a final will to put affairs in order. Great Emperor Ziwei seemed to know what Yi Futian was thinking. Right now, their minds were linked. Their wills were both merged with the various stars in the sky. The former continued saying, "I have perished for many years and should not exist in this world. However, because I was concerned about the Ziwei segmentum, I sealed some of my will in the various stars. I am aware of everything you have done in the past. Several years ago, you awakened my will, which allowed me to have the opportunity to reappear in the world. I should be thanking you." When Yi Futian heard Great Emperor Ziwei's words, his guess was proven correct. The latter's return would be followed by his disappearance forever. "Lend me your body," said Great Emperor Ziwei. As he said this, endless starlight surged into Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian, whose eyes were closed all this while, felt his body suddenly tremble. Starlight shone, and the various stars in the sky resonated with his body. Suddenly he opened his eyes. Within them, starlight shot out towards the heavens. The light was dazzling as it swept towards Wang Xiao, controlled by Tianyan the Great. Tianyan the Great had relied on Wang Zhao's body to be reborn into this world. Great Emperor Ziwei now relied on Yi Futian's body to return. Both were similar but were fundamentally different. However, it seemed like they had returned to square one. The battle between Tianyan the Great and Great Emperor Ziwei was like the battle between Wang Xiao and Yi Futian back then. It was as though they had returned to the past in a dream. This scene seemed familiar. Tianyan the Great kept staring down below. His expression was serious, and he no longer had his previous overbearing aura. His arrogant attitude had disappeared. No matter how monstrous Yi Futian was, he was still an ant in the eyes of Tianyan the Great. Now, the person who appeared before him was Great Emperor Ziwei. The latter was previously one of the most powerful great emperors who had several great emperors under his command. During the Age of Emperors, Great Emperor Ziwei's name was renowned far and wide. Tianyan the Great returned using Wang Zhao's body and wanted to seize the Ziwei segmentum. However, he never imagined that Great Emperor Ziwei would similarly be awakened by Yi Futian and use the latter to return. Behind him, the various cultivators saw all of this, and their hearts were throbbing. They had initially come to be spectators, wanting to witness the destruction of the Ziwei segmentum and the death of Yi Futian with their own eyes. Yet, they never imagined that they would witness such a grand scene. Great Emperor Ziwei had also appeared. The look in the eyes of the Lord of Tianyan City was extremely ugly. How could this have happened? He was somewhat uneasy. Great Emperor Ziwei had returned. Could Tianyan the Great defeat him? It surely would not be a problem, the Lord of Tianyan City reassured himself mentally. Tianyan the Great had recovered and was more powerful. He also wielded the imperial arm that he once forged. He was definitely at an absolute advantage. Even if Great Emperor Ziwei had returned, what could the latter do? The end result would not change. Just as he contemplated all these things, unparalleled starlight shone down below in the Ziwei segmentum. The stars shone brilliantly. The various stars around the Z-Way segmentum lit up at the same time, radiating with dazzling divine halos. It was blinding to behold. This light pierced out into the distance and illuminated the vast sky. An extreme power emanated from below. This was the true authority of heaven. They were far apart, yet under this might, it was as though there was no distance between them. Everyone could sense the intense pressure from the will. Some people were already moving backward. The cultivators of the ancient god clans and the other cultivators from the divine prefecture were retreating. They did not dare stick their noses in a battle between two great emperors. They would die horrible deaths. Rumble. A strange sound could be heard in the heavens above. It was as though the heavens and earth were collapsing. Tianyan the Great stepped forward. His deity-like figure lifted up sky tremor and myriads of tremoring pulses frenziedly swept down. They struck the heavens and made countless cracks appear in the space. It was as though the sky was being smashed into pieces. He knew that closing the distance was meaningless in a battle at their level. Their target would always be in their attack range no matter where they went. They could only fight. He was also a great emperor who had returned from the ancient age. He wouldn't walk away from a fight. Today, he would wield his imperial arms, kill Z-Way and seize the segmentum. He would replace the latter. Starlight enveloped Yi Futian's figure as the silhouette of great Emperor Z-Way formed around him, merging with Yi Futian's figure. He also appeared like a deity. An unparalleled aura emanated from his figure. Countless stars resonated with him. As Z-Way, he controlled the stars in the sky and was their master. A beam of divine light shot out and pierced the space. Peerless Emperor Might descended. At this moment, great Emperor Z-Way was like the ruler of the heavens and the earth. An extremely murderous aura penetrated the space. This was ultimate murderous intent. It was the murderous intent of a great emperor. Yi Futian's figure shot out straight ahead like a bolt of lightning. As he pointed his finger forwards, the figure of great Emperor Z-Way around him did the same. Endless starlight of the great path gathered to form a divine sword that pierced the heavens. Tianyan the Great's body grew even larger as he became a towering god. Sky tremors similarly expanded as it came crashing down on great Emperor Z-Way's attack. The two world-destroying attacks collided. The surrounding space collapsed and was destroyed. They tore apart the space and appeared in the chaotic flow of space. It seemed as though they were no longer in their initial space. In the endless storm of chaotic currents, divine swords shot out and frenziedly shattered the tremoring pulses. Terrifying dull thuds could be heard. Circular shockwaves swept out. Everything around them was disintegrated. The shockwaves caused the entire Z-Way segmentum to tremble. Countless cracks appeared on the light shroud as it then gradually dissipated. However, at the same time, the terrifying divine sword kept advancing. Chapter 2650, Fear of Tianyan City? Chapter 2650, Fear of Tianyan City. Tianyan the Great, a great emperor of armoring in ancient times, was famous throughout the world in his time. After so many decades, he returned again, using Wang Zhao's body, and was in this world. Today was his first battle, in its true sense, after his rebirth. However, in this epic first battle, he was met by Z-Way the Great, who had returned and died by his hand in battle. His fate was lamented by many. It was sad and shocking. However, wasn't he also the one who sought his own end? He could have chosen anyone as a target, but he picked Z-Way segmentum. Perhaps even he did not anticipate that Z-Way would be woken up like that and came back to put an end to him. Tianyan the Great was not the same as Z-Way the Great. Tianyan the Great had been reincarnated in the truest sense of the word to reappear in peak physical form. But Z-Way the Great was different. If he had a choice, Tianyan the Great would have never wanted to die alongside Z-Way the Great. Unfortunately, once a step was taken, there was no turning back. In the void, the cultivators from the ancient god clans finally woke up from their shock, and then just as quickly, all of them quietly exited. Now that Tianyan the Great had been killed, the situation was completely reversed. They dared not linger needlessly for fear that Z-Way the Great might obliterate them as well in a raging rampage. Of course, it was best for them to slip away at this time. The storm of destruction was still flowing about, and those cultivators quickly evacuated from different locations. They were running pretty fast. Withdraw. The city lord of Tianyan was mourning, but this was not the time for regret. The most urgent matter was to get out of here as soon as possible. They were moving fast as their group tried to get out as quickly as they could. This time, it was more miserable and embarrassing than the last time. Futian did not chase them down. Ziwei the Great was using his own body to urge all the power from the stars in heaven for that explosive and apocalyptic strike, ending the life of Tianyan the Great. All that effort was burning through the will of Ziwei, or else they would not have been able to kill a reincarnated great emperor, much less Tianyan the Great, as aided by the imperial arms. He could sense that the will of Ziwei among the stars was gradually dissipating, and he was filled with an inexplicable sense of sadness. Futian's eyes opened to watch that elusive figure above the firmament. At this moment, Ziwei the Great was becoming more blurry by the second. "Teacher," Futian called out in a low voice. His voice was deep and tinged with sadness. In his hand, he held the imperial arms, the sky tremoring, but it was no longer in its complete form because the will of Tianyan the Great that had been inside the imperial arms was destroyed. Naturally, Ziwei the Great had to destroy it, or else he would not have been able to capture the sky tremoring. Even in its incomplete form, it was considered an imperial arms. Even if he could not exert all of its strength, carrying imperial arms would still increase his power considerably. Obviously, Ziwei the Great had deliberately seized it to leave these imperial arms to Futian. "I was already in existence in the void. It is only a trace of my will that has been integrated into the stars in heaven that guarded Ziwei. To have another chance to return for a final battle and see the future, I am more than satisfied. Futian, thank you for waking me up so that I can see for myself how Ziwei looks like today," Ziwei the Great said with a smile that gradually disappeared. It seemed very gentle indeed. After waking up in the hereafter and having accepted a disciple as his successor, he was more than content. It was far better than being sealed among the stars in heaven. More importantly, this disciple of his was not some simple character. In the future, the name of Ziwei would not be forgotten. "The disciple is incompetent," Futian replied. "How can you be incompetent when you can contend with a much older generation than your age?" Ziwei the Great asked. "More importantly, this time, you are facing a great emperor who had been reincarnated. This is not because you were incompetent. On the contrary, it highlighted the height of your ability. However, in the future, you must continue to cultivate so that you can enter the imperial realm as soon as possible. By then, even if you encounter those from the olden days, they will not be able to challenge you." "I understand." Futian nodded. "Take care of Ziwei." Ziwei the Great nodded and left him with those final words. Then, his elusive figure transformed into endless starlight and dissipated between heaven and earth. At this moment, Futian could perceive that the will of Ziwei had disappeared among all the stars in heaven. Futian was a bit sad inside. Although Ziwei the Great didn't seem to mind because he had perished a long time ago, he still existed in some form in the world. Now, he was utterly and totally gone. He bowed deeply to all the stars in heaven. Although he was his teacher for only one day, it was like they had known each other for a very long time. Tianyan the Great schemed and plotted a walk-in so he could be reincarnated, but Ziwei the Great had always been guarding his people. At some point in time, Hua Jiyu came to Futian's side and bowed to the stars as well. Behind him, the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace had arrived, and together, they bowed and paid their respects. The gratitude was coming directly from their hearts. Ziwei the Great, as the Lord of all the stars in heaven, had honored the name of Ziwei. At this moment, countless cultivators in Ziwei segmentum had sensed everything that had happened. They stopped spontaneously and bowed to the sky above, respectfully bidding farewell to Ziwei the Great. Today, when Ziwei segmentum was in its most desperate hours, Ziwei the Great returned for the showdown, slew Tianyan, and saved Ziwei segmentum from destruction. He had passed his mantle on to Futian, allowing Futian to fully inherit his legacy, guarding Ziwei from now on. In the void, there was a silence. Everyone raised their heads, and their eyes fell on Futian. After today, The will of Ziwei the Great was no more, and Ziwei Segmentum had lost its former protector. Yi Futian would be the one shouldering this enormous task. He clutched the imperial arms, sky tremoring, tightly in his hand. A strong murderous intent was emitted from his body as he looked up into the sky. Tianyan the Great and the city lord of Tianyan came to destroy Ziwei and kill him. Tianyan the Great had been slain, and Tianyan City had lost its ultimate protector. Now, he wanted to escape? Could he escape? Even if he could get away from here, how would Tianyan City escape? Yi Futian turned around and headed toward the area below, with Hua Jiyu following behind him. Cultivators from all sides were walking along with them to return together in the direction of Ziwei Imperial Palace. No one spoke, and no one asked about anything. But the murderous intent upon Yi Futian was unmistakably felt by everyone. This murderous intent was being released without the slightest disguise. Yi Futian was not the only one. Murderous intents effused from the other cultivators as well. Obviously, all of them harbored a strong intention to kill. This time, although they suffered no casualties, their protector and great emperor had disappeared forever. This bloody debt must be repaid with blood. Above the temple inside Ziwei Imperial Palace, Yi Futian stood high above, all the powerful cultivators standing in front of him, waiting for his orders. The supreme elder of the Ziwei Imperial Palace, the 5 lords over the 5 halls of heavenly mandate, Wangshan, Ziwei, alchemy, and armoring, as well as the 4 great protectors, listen, Yi Futian proclaimed with authority. All those who have survived the divine tribulation of the Great Tribulation, come with me to Tianyan City. Yes, Palace Lord. Everyone bowed and obeyed. In the distance, the Lost Clan was keeping watch. I am entrusting the cultivators of the Lost Clan to protect Ziwei Imperial Palace on my behalf, Yi Futian shouted. Palace Lord Yi, feel free to do what you need to do. The Lost Clan is here to watch your back, Elder Sikong replied. Thank you. Yi Futian nodded. Then he headed to the passageway leading to Four Corner Village in the Divine Prefecture, accompanied by a brilliant divine light. Terrifying power of space tore through the void and penetrated the boundless space. Yi Futian and his entourage of mighty cultivators disappeared from Ziwei Imperial Palace as they made their way to the Divine Prefecture to seek their revenge. In Tianyan City, the city lord of Tianyan returned with all the cultivators a step ahead. People in the city lord's office and other cultivators inside Tianyan City were confused when they learned that they had returned so soon. Hadn't they attacked Ziwei Segmentum not so long ago? Could it be that they had already accomplished their mission so soon? No one knew that the first order of business with the city lord of Tianyan was to gather all the available resources inside the city lord's office, such as powerful implements, which were all divine arms of the second tribulation. They handed them over to the other cultivators inside the city lord's office. At the same time, he summoned all the top cultivators in Tianyan City and asked them to come to the city lord's office for a meeting. Such ponderous news instantly detonated inside Tianyan City. Soon, the news came out that during this trip to the Ziwei Segmentum, Tianyan the Great, who was reincarnated through Wang Zhao's body, was killed. Ziwei the Great had returned to slay Tianyan the Great. Tianyan City had lost the protection of the Great Emperor forever, and the City Lord's office of Tianyan City would no longer have the will of the Great Emperor. The ramification of this turn of events was not hard to imagine. Tianyan City's prestige fell among the ancient god clans. But this was not the most severe impact they were facing. Based on the armoring strength of Tianyan City, it may still stand at the top of the Divine Prefecture because no one would want to destroy an armoring clan. Its value was far too great to ignore. Ultimately, the greatest danger stemmed from Ziwei Segmentum's Yi Futian. Back then, when Haotian clan issued the kill order, Yi Futian had gone to stir up the pot. Now, without the protection from the Great Emperor, what could Tianyan City use to resist Yi Futian, who was an expert at Buddha's celerity? Just Yi Futian alone was capable of turning Tianyan City upside down. What would happen next? In the City Lord's office, the City Lord of Tianyan began to request help from other ancient god clans, trying to fight against Ziwei Segmentum. All the ancient god clans had verbally agreed to Tianyan City's request, but so far, None of them had sent forth any troops. Today's Tianyan city was a land of extreme danger. No one was willing to risk their own lives. They planned to wait and see, for the time being, to see what Yi Futian would do next. Outside the main hall of the city lord's office, someone spoke to the city lord of Tianyan and asked, "City lord, should we give up Tianyan city?" When those words were heard, everyone looked quite embarrassed. Tianyan city, whose name was known throughout the land of the divine prefecture, was scared like a little mouse right now. They were even considering giving up Tianyan city. The city lord of Tianyan shot an icy look at the person who spoke as he responded, "Don't you forget the honor of Tianyan city." Tianyan city had stood at the peak for numerous years. It had a glorious past. No matter in which era, Tianyan city, as the #1 power for armoring, held a prestigious status. Back then, when they hosted the armor competitions in the divine prefecture, all the top forces in the divine prefecture had gathered to observe the ceremony. Even Donghuang Imperial Palace had dispatched emissaries to participate, and Princess Donghuang Diyuan appeared in person. Now, should they abandon Tianyan city and flee? How shameful would it be? Furthermore, even if they leave, where could they go? Could they really stay hidden forever? Since when did the disciples of Wang become such cowards? An icy voice came from an ancient palace, attracting the attention of all the cultivators. They saw an elderly figure walking out, exuding a terrifying aura that was even more powerful than that of City Lord of Tianyan. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2651. Desperation. Chapter 2651. Desperation. The elder who spoke was the old city lord of Tianyan, and he was an old monster-level existence. When he first made his name, Donghuang the Great might not have been born yet. After he had handed Tianyan city over to the younger generations, he had been devoting himself to cultivation, trying to break the shackles and enter the imperial realm. However, that step proved too challenging to reach, so he had some ideas about alternative methods. It was a road that had never been taken by anyone else before, so he had been randomly moving about, not knowing whether it would be successful or how many years it might take. However, he had never expected that one day, Tianyan city would face a great catastrophe that would require his intervention to help Tianyan city to survive. Wang Zhan, the old city lord of Tianyan, called out to him. Wang Zhan was the name of the current city lord of Tianyan. Get the grand matrix of Tianyan ready. Even if the old ancestor is no longer, we will kill as many as we can. I haven't had to do this myself for a very long time. The old city lord's eyes were full of terrible light, and murderous intent was burning within them. Yes. Wang Zhan took the order and then made all the arrangements. The cultivators of Tianyan city had received the news, and cultivators from all sides began to gather in Tianyan city. For a time, an invisible pressure shrouded Tianyan city, making it extremely tense. This situation was similar to when the 6 ancient god clans had descended upon Ziwei Segmentum. Only now had the situation had reversed. It was Tianyan city that was facing this tremendous crisis. No one had imagined that Tianyan city, once flourishing and prosperous, would have a day like this. Time passed little by little, and Tianyan city began to put various countermeasures in place. Finally, in the sky above Tianyan city, a group of cultivators descended with horrific coercion as they passed over Tianyan city. They are here. Within the bounds of Tianyan city, countless cultivators raised their heads to look at the group that had appeared in the sky. Their hearts were beating wildly. Yi Futian and the others had arrived, coming for Tianyan city. There were not many of them who came, but everyone was an existence that had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. The man in the lead was Yi Futian. They were moving extremely fast, and it did not take long before they appeared in the sky above the city lord's office. The city lord's office was so vast that it was akin to a massive and magnificent golden city, showing a metallic luster under the sun. Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, looked up at the sky above and saw Yi Futian and the others standing above the city lord's office. A strong murderous intent swept over the city as everyone who stood in the void was full of murder. Feeling the aura from them, Wang Zhan's eyes sharpened. He saw that Yi Futian was flanked on both sides by the supreme elder of Ziwei Segmentum, Lord Chen, and Yi Futian's wife, Hua Jiu. They were both cultivators who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path. Coupled with Yi Futian's terrifying strength, there were 3 peak-level cultivators with the Ziwei Segmentum. In addition, some more powerful cultivators had survived the first divine tribulation of the Great Path, like Taoist monk Mu, Murong Yu, Emperor Shi, Blind Tai, Gu Donglu, Yang Wuqi, Fang Xiuan, as well as the mysterious Hua Qingqing and the Millet Emperor with Wangshan Watchtower in tow. Such a powerful group of cultivators instilled great fear in the cultivators' hearts from the city lord's office of Tianyan City, and all of them trembled with fear. The makeup of the group in front of them was not something that any one ancient god clan could contend with by itself. Even with all the forces summoned by Tianyan City, remained something beyond their reach. Could there still be any hope for Tianyan City? Outside the city lord's office, the hearts of the cultivators from Tianyan City were beating fiercely. This group was too incredible to be believed. Who would have thought that once upon a time Lord Chen was the only cultivator in Ziwei Segmentum who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path? He had been the one person who was able to do anything. Within 100 years, the Ziwei Segmentum, which was unsealed and inherited by Yi Futian, had become such a powerful force. What fantastic growth this was! This was the first time that the Ziwei Segmentum had mobilized so many of its top cultivators. And their first battle was to take place in Tianyan City. Launch the heaven-tempering divine matrix. The city lord gave an icy command, and suddenly, golden divine lights shot out from the city lord's office, heading higher into the sky. Countless divine lights converged and intersected above the firmament like pillars that passed beyond the sky. Soon, a boundless and massive divine pattern formed above the firmament, covering the entire Tianyan City Lord's office. It was the heaven-tempering divine matrix, a most terrifying divine matrix. Inside the city lord's office, all the divine lights were gathering towards the sky as if to temper everything in the world. Buzz. The old city lord's figure flashed and reappeared high above the sky. His great path domain and the heaven-tempering divine matrix had merged into one. His whole body was radiant and surrounded by divine light, as it continued to expand until he resembled a mighty god from heaven who could not be denied. Since you came here to die, don't bother going back, the old city lord of Tianyan said loudly and clearly so that everyone inside and outside the city lord's office could hear his unmistakably overbearing voice. The divine light from the heaven-tempering divine matrix had integrated with his body and his great path so that one could not be without the other. He was a part of the divine matrix and could directly control it. For many years, he had been searching for ways to break through the shackles to become a great emperor. He tried for many years, and in the end, he embarked on the path that used tempering methods to temper himself and made himself a sharp weapon of divine arms. This was where Tianyan the Great had pointed him to, and he had been following his instructions. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at the ancestor of Tianyan City. His expression couldn't be colder, and the murderous intent remained fervent. Up, the old city lord spat. And suddenly, from the hidden armory of the city lord's office inside Tianyan City, implements flew out and merged directly into the heaven-tempering divine matrix, absorbing the light from the matrix itself. It puffed out an incomparable aura. The entire city lord's office was shrouded in that aura of destruction. This kind of strength had pleasantly surprised all the cultivators in the city lord's office of Tianyan City enough to wipe out their previous worries and anxiety. Their old city lord was in possession of such terrifying power to control the divine matrix and incorporate other divine arms. What power was this exactly? He must have already been at the second tribulation plane. At this level of existence, no one could survive the divine matrix, he urged. You don't walk the path to heaven but insist on knocking on hell's door. The old city lord of Tianyan looked down below. His voice was more dominant than ever. Even if Tianyan City no longer has a great emperor, Tianyan City remains, and it is not something that the likes of you may covet. When his voice fell, The divine arms puffed out incomparable light of the world that aimed directly at Yi Futian and his party. Yi Futian held the imperial arms, and it was not missed by the cultivators from Tianyan City. This was an imperial arm that belonged to them initially. However, without the will of the great emperor, Yi Futian couldn't exert the full power of the imperial arms, and the increase in his power was greatly limited. At this moment, wisps of aura poured into the imperial arms. In an instant, the sky tremoring released an unparalleled divine glory and emitted an astonishing aura. He raised his head to look at the old city lord above the firmament and stepped up into the sky. A might figure materialized, a supernatural vision almost like a deity. At the same time, an immensely heavy force permeated from the sky tremoring in his hand. Yi Futian was not well versed in the ways of the sky tremoring, but he was an expert at the divine hammer of the protector, one of the 7 divine methods from Four Corner Village. Bang! Yi Futian stepped forward again, and with just a single step, the void vibrated. At the same time, his figure disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared again, he was right in front of the old city lord. Sky tremoring, the imperial arms blasted down like a god in heaven had unleashed the divine hammer. Its might suppressed this corner of the sky, and heaven and earth were awed into silence. The old city lord's face quickly changed to one with immense shock. He willed the divine arms inside the heaven-tempering divine matrix to slaughter forward with madness. However, like a celestial god descending on earth, Yi Futian shattered every attack simply with the sky tremoring as it slammed on the stalwart body of the old city lord, right onto his chest. In an instant, countless destructive shockwaves blasted on him, and the old city lord's body exploded and pulverized. His soul and spirit scattered, disappeared in an instant, and died tragically on the spot. Before he died, he had not even had a chance to let a scream before he was killed. All the cultivators from the city lord's office of Tianyan City were stunned as they stared blankly at everything happening in front of them. Did he die just like that? Their old city lord, who was invincible and mighty, who had claimed to keep Yi Futian and the others here forever, had died? That was it? They had gone from the uncertainty to hope, now, to despair once again. The old city lord was killed with one blow. What else could the city lord's office of Tianyan City use to contend with Yi Futian? Kill! The city lord of Tianyan commanded, a horrible look on his face. As soon as his voice fell, the attack from the heaven-tempering divine matrix was unleashed, but Yi Futian merely gave it a look before his figure flashed. The sky tremoring sent another strike directly at the heaven-tempering divine matrix. In an instant, cracks appeared on the divine matrix before it collapsed and shattered. Outside the city lord's office, when all the cultivators saw that the divine matrix in front of them had been neutralized, they trembled. Where was the old city lord of Tianyan? Yi Futian lowered his head to survey the area below, and the murderous intent was still strong in his cold eyes. The eyes of the city lord of Tianyan showed hopelessness and a true sense of desperation. Yi Futian was holding their imperial arms, the sky tremoring from Tianyan City, which they knew to be unstoppable. Whether it was the old city lord or the heaven-tempering divine matrix, both were crushed by a single blow. Was this the end of Tianyan City? I can give you anything you want. The city lord of Tianyan looked at Yi Futian and said, although Tianyan City has gone to Ziwei Segmentum several times before, it has never been breached. When these words were spoken, everyone understood that he had given up, knowing that he could never win. He wanted to compromise and submit to Yi Futian. Kneel down. Yi Futian looked down below and said coldly to the city lord of Tianyan. With this command, the face of the city lord of Tianyan turned unsightly. Asking him to kneel down? Inside and outside the city lord's office, the hearts of all the cultivators palpitated. Yi Futian was asking the city lord of Tianyan to kneel. The clan lord of the ancient god clans, the city lord of Tianyan City, was humiliated. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2652, The Death of the First Man in Armoring. Chapter 2652, The Death of the First Man in Armoring Kneel. How could someone with the status of the city lord of Tianyin kneel before him? Wang Zhan raised his head to look at Yi Futian, who was in the void, and there was anger in his eyes. He said coldly, "I am in charge of the premier armoring principality in the divine prefecture. Yi Futian, you are too bold." Yi Futian didn't bother to respond. He merely glanced at the Tianyin city lord's office below as a mighty figure, like a deity, appeared while raising the sky tremoring in his hand. The expression on the city lord of Tianyin changed in a flash. A random roar came out, and the hammer blasted down, right inside the bounds of city lord's office, located behind the city lord of Tianyin. But in an instant, many ancient halls inside the vast complex were razed to the ground. Many cultivators in the city lord's office screamed most piteously, some even wailed. Under the terrifying shockwaves, an unknown number of people were cut down on the spot as they were being slaughtered. Boom! A monstrous rage erupted from the city lord of Tianyin. Beside him, many other top figures released the aura of their great path as well. Their eyes, too, were full of anger, glowing with a bloody light. Do you remember that when you left the Heavenly Mandate realm, you razed the Heavenly Mandate Academy to the ground with one palm strike before you left? Yi Futian surveyed the city lord of Tianyin city below as he remarked coldly, "Everything you have given to the Heavenly Mandate Academy, I am returning to you." The city lord of Tianyin city turned his head to glance back. Other than anger and desperation, there was visible pain in his eyes. He remembered the time when he had gone to Heavenly Mandate Academy and asked Yi Futian to use the divine body. Because his request was rejected, he smashed Heavenly Mandate Academy with a strike of his hand. At the time, he would have never imagined that Yi Futian would stand above Tianyin city one day, doing the same thing to the city lord's office in Tianyin. At that time, he saw Yi Futian as no more than an insect, and he gave the matter no further thought whatsoever. The destruction of Heavenly Mandate Academy was such a minuscule distraction, and it was barely a thing in the eye of someone who was in charge of the foremost holy land of armoring in the divine prefecture. Did he have regrets? What use did he have of regrets? If he knew what would happen today and that everything he did on that day would lead to the annihilation of Tianyin city, he would have never done it. Kneel. Yi Futian lowered his head to look down. He continued to press the city lord of Tianyin. Crunch. The city lord of Tianyin clenched his fists, and a horrific aura permeated from him. But even if he was angry, what could he do? Today, they were truly heading towards an untenable situation. It's finished. Those watching from afar thought to themselves. Everything felt a little unreal to them at this moment. Once, Tianyin city was so prosperous and powerful that everyone thought it would be an eternal holy land that would never perish. After all, it was the premier armoring principality in the divine prefecture. How could it ever be destroyed? However, right now, Tianyin city lord's office was about to meet its end. At this moment, a divine light descended from the sky above, as terrifying auras effused from it. Many people raised their heads to look up there. Who was coming? Could reinforcements be forthcoming? The city lord of Tianyin also looked yonder and saw that many cultivators had appeared in the sky above, along with those descending divine lights. Someone from the imperial palace of the divine prefecture. Chief from Domain Chief's Manor. Among those cultivators who had just arrived, there were cultivators from Donghuang Imperial Palace and the cultivators from Domain Chief's Manor of Tianyin Domain. The chief of Domain Chief's Manor was also among the new arrivals. The city lord of Tianyin had asked them for help before this. If it weren't because he was out of options, the city lord of Tianyin would not have done any of this. He knew that it was dangerous this time, so he had done everything he could do in advance. The question was, could Donghuang Imperial Palace and the Domain Chief's Manors save the city lord's office from the brink of destruction? Yi Futian, a voice called out. Above the firmament, a cultivator came forth, his body dazzled with divine light and a sharp aura. It was none other than Du Yu, the Spear Emperor. This is none of your business. Before Du Yu could say anything more, he was forcibly cut off by Yi Futian. Yi Futian didn't even bother to look at him. He merely continued, This is a private matter between the Ziwei segmentum and Tianyan City. You did not look happy about it, but even he had to admit that this man, once his junior, had grown in leaps and bounds, to a point where he could no longer catch up. Yi Futian had made such impressive improvements, with even more terrifying combat effectiveness. Every time he saw him, Yi Futian had made a great leap in cultivation. Tianyan City is a principality of the Divine Prefecture, after all. Yi Futian, while in the Divine Prefecture, leave a way out for yourself. The chief of Tianyan Domain Chief's Manor felt compelled to remind him of this. Not too long ago, Tianyan City had participated in the battle with the Devil World, and Wang Xiao was their star combatant. Therefore, Tianyan City had asked them for help, and they could not justify not lending a helping hand in return. Very well. Yi Futian glanced at the chief of Tianyan Domain Chief's Manor and replied. The sky tremoring in his hand was dazzled with divine light as traces of horrific shockwaves pervaded. He said, if anyone thinks they can save Tianyan City Lord's office, you may freely make your move. Having said that, he continued to stare at the City Lord of Tianyan, who was below, and said, People of Ziwei Imperial Palace, here is your order, kill at will. Yes, Palace Lord. All of them took the order and moved at the same time towards the City Lord's office of Tianyan. Every cultivator was filled with the terrifying aura of the Tribulation Plane. Inside the City Lord's office in Tianyan City, traces of powerful aura erupted. They had no choice now but to fight. The terrifying aura of the Great Path exploded successively as the top cultivators from Tianyan City marched towards the sky toward the oncoming battle. Humph! Lord Chen gave a cold snort and pointed the starry scepter in his hand forward. Suddenly, extremely heavy coercion fell upon the entire City Lord's office. A dull sound came from the space, and many felt that they had encountered a power of suppression that simply wouldn't budge. Chen Yi's body turned into a ray of light, and it was gone in a flash. That ray of light passed through one body after another. In an instant, several cultivators were pierced by the light as their bodies gradually turned into light and disappeared. Hua Jiyu moved her mind slightly, and suddenly many felt their bodies were becoming still. Her eyes were cold, infused with murderous intent. Everything that Tianyan City had done to Yi Futian was unforgivable. Blind Tai, Fang Xiyuan, and other cultivators went down one after another like tigers that had torn into a flock of sheep. With such an absolute gap in strength, there was no way the cultivators from the City Lord's office could stop them. The fight was completely one-sided. More frightening was that soon, cultivators in the first tribulation plane began falling. Yi Futian stood there without moving as if he was just observing the situation. He stood there like a deity, holding the imperial arms, the sky tremoring. Wang Zhan, the City Lord of Tianyan, clearly did not dare to move, as the coercion was hovering right above him. As soon as he made a move, it was possible that Yi Futian would retaliate. The cultivators from Donghuang Imperial Palace and Tianyan Domain Chief's Manor, likewise, were watching all that was happening in front of them, and they were not pleased. Yi Futian had ignored them and had gone ahead to clean up Tianyan City Lord's office. If someone could save the City Lord's office, all they needed to do was take direct action. This meant that as soon as they attacked, Yi Futian would join the fight. It didn't matter to him one way or the other. Today, in Tianyan City, the destruction of Tianyan City Lord's office seemed to be a foregone conclusion. All the cultivators in the area below the City Lord's office were feeling quite desperate. They couldn't see a way out in front of them, only a dead end. Lord, someone called out to him as if still pinning their hopes on the City Lord of Tianyan. But what could Wang Zhan do at this moment? He hated the fact that there was nothing he could do. Even emissaries from the Imperial Palace of the Divine Prefecture hadn't been such effective deterrents. Do you have to exterminate us all? The City Lord of Tianyan looked up at Yi Futian and asked. Although he did not turn his head, everyone's death surfaced in his mind. Those top cultivators who were the hopes of Tianyan were being finished off one by one. Kneel! Yi Futian lowered his head and looked at the City Lord of Tianyan below. He still had just that one word. That cold and ruthless voice made the City Lord of Tianyan feel cold all over. He couldn't get the answer he wanted, Yi Futian wanted him to submit. A feeling of grief and anger surged in his heart, but the people in Tianyan City were still dying, being cut down. It was as if the longer he resisted kneeling, the slaughter would not stop. However, what if he did kneel? Would Yi Futian then spare Tianyan City Lord's office? Everything that had happened over the years was my doing. If I kneel, can you let them go? The city lord of Tianyan asked. After all, he did not want the Wang clan of Tianyan City to end on his watch. As for him, he did not think he would come out of this ordeal alive. Judging from Yi Futian's action, it was impossible that he would be spared. Still, Yi Futian continued to stare him down and made no response. He couldn't get a response from Yi Futian, let alone any promises. Wang Zhan realized that he was not in any position to negotiate terms. The fate of the entire Tianyan City Lord's office was in Yi Futian's hands. What conditions could they talk about? What could he use to bargain? Boom! An astonishing aura erupted from the city lord of Tianyan, but in the next moment he knelt on the ground. Lord! For a time, many voices called out to him, and their eyes were fixed on Wang Zhan. Inside and outside the city lord's office, countless eyes were fastened on him. The ancient God Clan's clan leader, the first man of armoring in all of Divine Prefecture, the city lord of Tianyan, Wang Zhan, had bent his knees. High above the sky, the chief of Tianyan Domain Chief's manor was shocked to his core when he saw what was happening before him. Even though his relationship with Wang Zhan was not particularly chummy, Wang Zhan was a remarkable giant of his generation, a pillar of the Divine Prefecture. Now he was forced to prostrate on the ground against his will, in total and complete humiliation. That is enough. The chief of Tianyan Domain Chief's manor looked at Yi Futian and said, "Let it go, do you also said?" Yi Futian looked up at them with indifferent eyes. They were still tinged with an undeniable iciness. Where were you when the Heavenly Mandate Academy was being destroyed? Where were you when Ziwei Segmentum was invaded, and its continents were being broken apart? Yi Futian looked at them and said nonchalantly, "Now, in front of me, you want to act like you are some compassionate being? The city lord's office of Tianyan City is the #1 armoring principality in the Divine Prefecture, so the lives of their cultivators are more precious than the others? Don't forget, I, Yi Futian, am the former college chief of Heavenly Mandate Academy, the overseer of Ziwei Segmentum. Those who had fallen were the ones under my protection." He spoke coldly to the representatives from the Imperial Palace and the chief of the Tianyan Domain Chief's manor. He raised the sky tremoring in his hand as his figure flashed and disappeared directly. Boom! A loud bang was heard as the sky tremoring blasted on top of the city lord of Tianyan City. Wang Zhan, kneeling, looked up and saw the incoming attack with indescribable despair in his eyes. Then, his body burst into pieces. He knelt there and was crushed to death. Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, the first man in armoring in all of the Divine Prefecture, had met his end. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2653, Desolation. Chapter 2653, Desolation. The city lord of Tianyan died on his knees. There was a dead silence inside the city lord's office. All the fighting had ceased as everyone looked at the place where Wang Zhan had perished. There were cracks on the ground, causing the entire city lord's office to split. The faces of everyone in the Wang family were full of despair. Even the people from the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture could not stop Yi Futian's slaughter, and no one tried to save them. Tianyan City Lord's office was left to be slaughtered by the others, without any ability to fight back. Once upon a time, Tianyan City was a flourishing principality that was respected. Anyone from the City Lord's office, especially the descendants of the Wang family, was proud and confident. Wherever they went, they were held in high esteem and admired. Who would have thought that a day like this would be possible? All because of a cultivator from the original realm. Who was the one responsible for this calamity? The cultivators outside the city lord's office were speechless as well. They were witnessing the demise of the city lord's office. The fact remained that the entire Tianyan city was controlled by the city lord's office. The destruction of the city lord's office at this moment was incredibly poignant in its sorrow. This also meant that the glory of Tianyan city had disappeared forever. From now on, Tianyan city would no longer be the main city of Tianyan domain and would never return to its former glory. The cultivators from the imperial palace and the Tianyan domain chief's manor lowered their heads to look there, coming to the same conclusion in their hearts. No one could have dissuaded Yi Futian from destroying Tianyan city, and no one could stop him. If they had insisted, Yi Futian would probably have no qualms combating them with the imperial arms. No one here would dare to claim they could counter Yi Futian's attack with the imperial arms. After all, his strength was already at the peak, and only someone at Feng Ru's level could even attempt to try. Even if there was anger, they could only watch everything happening in front of them. Unfortunately, the great emperor had promised not to raise his hand against Yi Futian, or else he could never have acted with such impunity. After Yi Futian had executed Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, he looked at the cultivators in front of him as he levitated in the sky, surveying the vast city lord's office. He said, "Uncle Tai, direct the others to collect all the valuable divine arms, armoring methods, and materials in Tianyan city." "Yes," Blind Tai acknowledged. He took several people with him as their divine consciousness moved through the city lord's office and began plundering. "Whoever makes a move will be killed without mercy," Yi Futian announced as he glanced at the crowd beneath him. "Those who are below the realm of Renhuang will be spared. I advise you not to squander this opportunity." Coercion shrouded the entire Tianyan city. Some of the cultivators in Tianyan city were in total despair, but others were hopeful. At least, Yi Futian had spared those below the realm of Renhuang and seemed to have no plans to kill them. But what about those above the realm of Renhuang? What did Yi Futian want with them in Ziwei Segmentum? Of course, they would not be there as guests. When they went to Ziwei Segmentum, they would undoubtedly become Yi Futian's captives, and their lives were held in the hands of the others. However, could they afford to say no? Their lives were held in the hands of other people, and Yi Futian had already been more than gracious, sparing the lives of their descendants and progenies. If they antagonized Yi Futian further, they might put their lives at risk. "I don't have a lot of time." Seeing that no one had responded, Yi Futian continued in an icy tone, causing the cultivators in Tianyan City Lord's office to shudder. Then a group of them levitated into the air. All of them were Renhuang-level cultivators. "We'll go with you," an old man said. It seemed as if he was the leader of the remaining survivors. His cultivation was at the peak of Renhuang. In the preceding battle, cultivators above the realm of Renhuang had already been killed. There were not many of them, to begin with. Once they were targeted by the people from Ziwei Segmentum, there was no way they could survive. Cultivators at that level posed a certain level of threat and could not be spared. Even kept as prisoners, it would be a concern and run a much more significant risk of something going awry in the future. With the current power of Ziwei Segmentum, cultivators in the Renhuang realm were much easier to control. Now the cultivators of the Tribulation Plane in Ziwei Segmentum had formed an amazing group, with even more people at the peak of Renhuang. Many people had stuck at that level. Therefore, when brought to Ziwei Segmentum, cultivators at this level could be easily controlled. Lord Chen and Blind Tai lead the way forward, and their aura of the Great Path shrouded those Renhuang, controlling them. "Let's go," Yi Futian said. Then, people left, taking away all the Renhuang in Tianyan City Lord's office. Countless people in Tianyan City witnessed all this and watched them leave. After a while, the group disappeared from sight. Looking back, everyone saw that the Tianyan City Lord's office was now in ruins, and they couldn't help but lament its fate. Here, it used to be the most glorious place in all of Tianyan City. For a while, it was so prosperous that it had even overwhelmed the domain chief's manor in Tianyan Domain. In the last armorer competition, Tianyan City invited everyone from the Divine Prefecture to observe the ceremony. The Imperial Palace had dispatched emissaries, Dong Huangdian arrived in person, and Wang Zhao's name was known all over the world. At that time, the prestige of Tianyan City had reached its epitome. But it was also on that day that Yi Futian appeared and fought against Wang Xiao. It was as if that day was a turning point. From that moment forward, Tianyan City went from its peak to its decline. Today, the city lord of Tianyan and the old city lord were both slain, and all of their tribulation plane cultivators had fallen. Even their renhuang had been taken away, and everything in Tianyan City Lord's office was plundered. Tianyan City Lord's office had no value to speak of anymore. Some were weeping quietly inside the city lord's office, while some roared in anger. Either way, all anyone could feel was a deep sense of sadness. City Lord's office in Tianyan City is one of the principalities in the Divine Prefecture. The Imperial Palace and the Domain Chief's Manor are both here. Why don't you stop him? Even at this moment, some fearless young man raised his head to look at the cultivators looming high above the sky. He questioned them in an accusatory tone. His eyes were glowing with a bloody light. He was so enraged by anger that he had lost his ability to reason. The cultivators of the Imperial Palace and the Domain Chief's Manor merely lowered their heads and regarded him with pity. They chose not to engage him in his accusations. It is Tianyan City's imperial arms that had done the damage. How can we have stopped it? One of the men said lightly, and it shut everyone up in the area below. It seemed that it finally dawned on them that it was their imperial arms, the sky tremoring, that had spelled their doom. If it weren't for the sky tremoring, they would probably still have the power to fight and not be in this miserable predicament. So, was all this the fault of their ancestor, Tianyan the Great? How sad. The Imperial Palace and the Domain Chief's Manor cultivators also began to go, leaving the desolate city lord's office behind. After they left, the cultivators outside the city lord's office were tempted to venture inside themselves. Some cultivators entered into the city lord's office, wanting to see if there were any other treasures left to be had. Items that Ziwei Segmentum didn't think worthy didn't mean that they weren't valuable to others. This city lord's office was full of treasures. What are you guys doing? The people inside the city lord's office asked them coldly. At this time, were these men prepared to rob them at their most desperate hours? No one paid any heed to their protest, however. Those who would come in here were those who had ideas of their own. Now that Tianyan City was finished, who would care about those who were left behind? It was extremely sad to behold. Cultivators from the Wang family of the city lord's office watched everything that happened with murderous intent in their eyes. These people were even more hateful than Yi Futian. Tianyan City Lord's office was once the ruling principality in Tianyan City, the city's pride, and the entire Tianyan City was under the command of the City Lord's office. Now that the City Lord's office had been eradicated, these people were so heartless as to participate in the looting. How cruel was this reality? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2654, Slaves? Chapter 2654, Slaves. The destruction of Tianyan City Lord's office shocked the entire Divine Prefecture, and the news quickly spread all over the land. The ancient god clans were the first to receive the news. Even after they withdrew from the Ziwei Segmentum, they had been keeping close tabs there. They had a feeling that Yi Futian would start with Tianyan City first. After the death of Tianyan the Great, Tianyan City became the only ancient god clan without the protection of a great emperor's will. How could Yi Futian miss such an excellent opportunity to take them down? Sure enough, they soon received the news that Tianyan City Lord's office was destroyed and Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, killed. He had died on his knees. This news greatly alarmed the other ancient god clans, becoming even more vigilant. After all, there was a precedent in front of them. If Yi Futian were that strong, sooner or later, he would come to destroy them, just as he did with Tianyan City. In addition, after some forces such as the domain chief manors of both the West Sea Domain and the Donghua Domain learned of the news, they were greatly troubled. Chief Shihai and Ning Yuan, the domain chief of Donghua, knew very well that if it were not because they were directly under the command of Donghuang Imperial Palace, which Yi Futian still heeded, he would have already started in on them. Now, there was a sharp sword hanging above all of their heads. This sword may fall at any given time, and they would not have a moment's peace. They heard that when Yi Futian destroyed the Tianyan City Lord's office, the people from the imperial palace were present but did nothing to stop it. Yi Futian had the imperial arms, the sky tremoring, in his possession, so people from the imperial palace just watched the city lord's office be destroyed. An ancient god clan such as Tianyan City was a principality in the land of the Divine Prefecture, the premier armoring force in the Divine Prefecture, and the most powerful force in the Tianyan domain. Yet it disappeared just like that and became part of the past. It was said that after Yi Futian and the others left, the city lord's office was raided by other cultivators inside Tianyan City. Many cultivators Yi Futian spared were brutally murdered by the people of Tianyan City and met a miserable end. The horrific nature and cruelty of men were played out so vividly in Tianyan City. They were all believers when things were going well. But in times of need, they chose to pick up the swords and join in the slaughter. Many lamented and grieved. After this battle, no one did not know of Yi Futian's name in the land of the Divine Prefecture. All the cultivators at Ziwei Imperial Palace were eagerly waiting for the return of Yi Futian and the others. When they learned of the destruction of Tianyan City Lord's office, the people of Ziwei Imperial Palace were extremely excited. The principalities of Tianyan City had moved against them more than once, and twice they had used imperial arms on Ziwei. Now they were finally destroyed, and justice had been served. In the imperial palace, they watched those cultivators from Tianyan City Lord's office who had been taken prisoner. Each of them wore cold expressions, and fierce murderous intent raged about them. Those from the Tianyan City Lord's office only felt tremendously sorry for themselves. Now, they had indeed fallen into the lion's den, and there was probably no hope for them ever. Uncle Tai, give Lord Chen the divine arms and implements that we have taken from the city lord's office in Tianyan City and have him distribute them among the 5 palaces and the protectors. Each protector may take a few suitable pieces. The rest can be divided equally among the 5 palaces as their cultivation resources. The lords of each palace will be in charge of them and may allocate them as they see fit. Yi Futian continued to speak to Blind Tai. Also, the resources for armoring that we have taken will be handed over to the armoring palace to be at your disposal, including all the armoring methods and materials. I suggest that we build an armory inside Ziwei Imperial Palace and store these items and all the implements and divine arms that we will be making in the future. What do you think? Good. Blind Tai nodded. Everyone else agreed. Now they had taken all the resources of Tianyan City, including the method of armoring and various other resources. In the future, the level of armoring in Ziwei Imperial Palace will undoubtedly continue to improve. Conceivably, more and more divine arms and implements would be made, hence the need to build an armory. Everything else aside, just the divine arms they had looted this time from Tianyan City Lord's office were incredible. They had pretty much transported their entire treasure trove here. However, Yi Futian did not hide them somewhere else. Instead, he wanted them to be divided equally among the 5 palaces. This was the first time they had gone out to seek the destruction of an ancient god clan. They couldn't keep all the treasures and lock them inside the imperial palace. If he wanted to use this event to strengthen his people as a whole and ensure their loyalty to the Ziwei Imperial Palace, he had to do more than talk. At the very least, Ziwei Imperial Palace had to prove its value to the others, or else they had no reason to risk their lives for Ziwei. The 5 palaces each needed their resources. Previously they had the pills he produced, and now they had divine arms at their disposal. Not only did all these items significantly improve their strengths, but they made cultivators from each palace feel that they were part of the Ziwei Imperial Palace. They shared woes as well as fortune. If any gains were to be had, all of them would partake and benefit together. The fact remained that the Ziwei segmentum was still facing specific threats in the foreseeable future. Although the threat of Tianyan City was eliminated this time and they had obtained the imperial arms, they had paid a great price for their victory. The Ziwei segmentum had lost Ziwei the Great. No one knew what would happen in the future. Therefore, Yi Futian wanted to do the best he could to expand and secure the power of Ziwei Imperial Palace. In addition, The cultivation in the art of armoring would require Uncle Tai's attention. In addition to yourself, you will need to select and train up some more outstanding armorers. Those selected from the Ziwei segmentum can be trained carefully, but Yi Futian paused for a moment before he continued. Ziwei segmentum is connected to the outside world. Therefore, even the people from Ziwei segmentum cannot be fully trusted. If they are to be trained as part of the core group, they have to be evaluated strictly beforehand and their backgrounds thoroughly checked. Last time, what happened on the battlefield reminded him that he needed to be wary of any spies that might have been implanted inside Ziwei Imperial Palace. I understand. Naturally, Blind Tai understood the implications. I can find someone to help you. Yi Futian smiled as he thought of an ideal candidate, whose cultivation today was considerably more advanced. Fei Xue, the daughter of his teacher Qi Shengeng. Fei Xue possessed terrific abilities. Blind Tai nodded. As for them, Yi Futian looked at the Renhuang cultivators who were brought from Tianyan City. Starting today, all of them will be under the direct command of the Armoring Palace. Those who are good at armoring will be assigned to armoring. Those who are not good at armoring will be assigned to assist the building of the armory and all the preparations. In addition, find out what each of them is good at. These are the things worth knowing. I am afraid these matters must be entrusted to Uncle Tai. You will have your work cut out for you shortly. Of course, Blind Tai nodded. These things were what he had dreamed of. He couldn't be more pleased about how things had turned out. He was now in charge of the Armoring Palace and Tianyan City Lord's office. The target of their retaliation this time was the #1 principality of armoring in the Divine Prefecture. Everything they had taken was related to armoring. Thus it fell naturally under his management in the Ziwei Palace. He could tell that the other lords were quite envious of his good fortune this time. How come they were not so lucky to have these kinds of resources showered upon them? The Armoring Palace was the latest addition. However, no one expected that the first ancient god clan to be annihilated would be a force in armoring. This time the Armoring Palace would go through a significant transformation. In the future, its potential was immeasurable. Conceivably, it would continue to grow even more prosperously than the Alchemy Palace. If you need more manpower, you may have your pick from the Ziwei Imperial Palace, Yi Futian continued. Understood, Blind Tai replied before proceeding to take the prisoners away. At the same time, Lord Chen arranged for a lot of people to come help. After all, this time, they had brought over a lot of Renhuang, so they needed to establish reasonable control over them first. Although Yi Futian didn't kill them, he could squeeze all they are worth out of them and have them make divine arms and other implements for the Ziwei Imperial Palace. Afterward, Lord Chen and the others were tasked with cleaning up and distributing the rest of the implements. Although for most cultivators, the power from any implements was limited in the face of absolute power, implements could be used to increase one's combat effectiveness when the opponents were of the same realm. After Yi Futian left them, he planned to retreat again, to make another batch of pills. He wanted to produce another set that would improve the strength of the cultivators who were at the upper level of the Ziwei Imperial Palace. He felt that time was becoming ever more pressing and that chaos was looming. He must elevate the power of the Ziwei Imperial Palace to the highest possible level. Now, just having the Imperial arms was far from enough. While Yi Futian and the others were busy working, Haotian clan of the Divine Prefecture had not been sitting by idly. Inside a great hall, the clan lord of the Haotian clan was sitting cross-legged, surrounded by a dreamy divine light of the Great Path. In front of him, there were elusive phantoms. They were none other than the rulers of several other ancient god clans. They were meeting and conversing in a peculiar way. Tianyan City's destruction meant that there were only 5 remaining ancient god clan, and all of them could feel the danger hovering above them. Now, it was either for them to destroy Ziwei, or Ziwei would destroy them in return. Clearly, this was an urgent matter that needed to be discussed. The point was that Ziwei was not so easy to destroy anymore. Doing so might even bring severe catastrophes upon themselves. Everything else aside, just the abilities that Yi Futian derived from the Imperial arms and Buddha's celerity alone were enough for him to break into any one of their ancient god clans. Yi Futian's ability to come and go as he pleased was enough to cause endless disasters for them. Now, they must find a foolproof way to get rid of Yi Futian once and for all. But so far, they had not been able to come up with any solution. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2655. Earth-Shattering. Chapter 2655. Earth-Shattering. Yi Futian did not seek revenge on the other ancient god clans for the time being. It was not that they were incapable of annihilating these clans. But now was a time like none other. Ziwei had just lost its protection. Sure, he could go to the others' territories to do whatever he wanted, but they could do the same with the Ziwei segmentum. If it were only the Ziwei Imperial Palace they retaliated against, that would not have been a problem. But if the 6 ancient god clans decided to attack the Ziwei segmentum, he would not be able to defend it. Therefore, he chose not to make a move for the time being but go into retreat to produce more elixirs and cultivate. Today, Ziwei Imperial Palace had a better cultivation environment than any of the ancient god clans. Although the will of Ziwei was no more, several imperial stars remained. In addition, there were other great emperors upon the territories they were occupying, with high-level elixirs and various cultivation methods that they had obtained. The cultivation methods they had gotten from Taichu Holy Land, the Shen clan, and Tianyan City were extremely outstanding in cultivation. With time, the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace continued to grow in strength. Among them, several others continued to experience the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Fang Xiyuan's father, Fang Huan, had only experienced the tribulation after Fang Xiyuan had done it first. He was once a marvelous existence himself from Four Corner Village, a natural talent with the natural body of the Great Path. After Fang Huan, Duo Yu, and Tai Tu both crossed the divine tribulation of the Great Path, Four Corner Village became the place from which the most cultivators had survived the divine tribulations. This had something to do with the characteristics of the village itself. In the past, Four Corner Village, which wanted nothing to do with the world, had given birth to some cultivators who were born with the natural body of the Great Path. With instructions from the teacher and the ideal cultivation conditions provided by the Ziwei Imperial Palace, they could pass through the divine tribulation of Great Path one after another. Although there were some inherent dangers in the process of the divine tribulation, when these cultivators went through it, they were actually in much stronger condition than Emperor Shi back then. Furthermore, they had powerful weapons such as the divine arms, so the divine tribulations could not have harmed any of them. In addition, Yi Futian's friends and brothers in the land of the 9 realms had also stepped onto the peak of Renhuang. The senior brother, Sword Saint, his good friends and brothers like Yi Wuchen, Dou Zhao, Long Chen, disciple Xiao Muyu, and even Fei Xue had advanced very quickly. After Yi Futian passed on the cultivation method of the Shen clan to Fei Xue, she improved even more. After all, the blood of the Shen clan flowed through her body. The only difference was that she was from the branch of the Shen clan in the original realm. But inside Fei Xue's body, there was something extraordinary. Yi Futian's demonic beast companion Little Condor and Zifeng were in love with each other. Although the poor Little Condor had learned all of Yi Futian's abilities, he still couldn't beat Zifeng in a fight. This was all determined by their natural given talent. Lord Taixian and the others who also cultivated in the method of the Taichu reshaped the path of their cultivations, which was then supplemented by elixirs. Now they had also made breakthroughs in their progress. The strength of Ziwei Imperial Palace was constantly multiplying. However, the number of cultivators in the second tribulation plane had not increased. After all, this realm was more challenging and would take longer. There was no way of telling who would step into that realm first. In Ziwei Imperial Palace, Shi Qiao led a few men and found Yi Futian. She gave Yi Futian a storage ring, and Yi Futian smiled when he checked it, saying, "Thank you very much." "It's not for nothing, you don't need to demur," Shi Qiao said without a care. Shi Qiao, who was already in the tribulation plane, had an extraordinary temperament. She was noble and proud. It was as if she had descended from an empress. Yi Futian smiled. Over the years, his relationship with West Imperial Palace had been working very well. West Imperial Palace collected precious alchemical materials for him from various places in the Divine Prefecture, and he returned the favor by giving them the elixirs he produced. They each had proven their value to the other, so their relationship had been going strong. Shichiao herself spent most of her time cultivating inside Ziwei Imperial Palace. Naturally, Futian understood that this was a win-win situation. Some of the elixirs he gave to West Imperial Palace were top-notch, including elixirs in the second tribulation plane. Although Futian was still at the realm of peak Renhuang, his status was not the same as any other. He was a Renhuang who had survived 2 divine tribulations, and the subdivine elixirs that he produced were incredibly pure. However, he didn't understand the reason behind this strange phenomenon. He figured it must have something to do with his life spirit, which was aligned with the most primitive path. Therefore, the elixirs that he produced were very effective. Over the years, of all the ancient god clans in the Divine Prefecture, aside from Tianyan City, the rest of the ancient god clans had been getting weaker all along. Only the West Imperial Palace had been secretly expanding its power. He had provided several batches of elixirs to them, but the West Imperial Palace had never revealed anything on the outside, concentrating on strengthening themselves in secret. Although Futian had never asked, he knew that West Imperial Palace must have made significant progress by now. Ziwei Imperial Palace is now adding armoring to alchemy. In the future, you will probably not just be the strongest principality in alchemy but also the premier force in armoring. If you are interested, we can be partners in armoring. West Imperial Palace can provide you with armoring materials, and you can provide us divine arms, Shichiao proposed with a smile. Futian smiled and looked at her. The armoring level of the armoring palace is still quite limited, and Uncle Tai has not yet reached the realm he needs to be at. The resources seized from Tianyan City are enough for us for many years to come. Even if the West Imperial Palace provides us with materials, we will not use them right now. If the needs arise in the future, I will ask you. It's a pity then. We want to deepen our partnership with Ziwei Imperial Palace, but Palace Lord Yi has refused us mercilessly, Shichiao joked. Futian smiled and shook his head. Ziwei Imperial Palace and West Imperial Palace have always been very friendly. Why would Goddess Chiao think it needs more? Of course, more the better. Shichiao's beautiful eyes were now directed at Futian. If the old man can have his way, he would rather unite Ziwei Imperial Palace and West Imperial Palace in marriage. Those around Shichiao were stunned when they heard these words. What did she mean by that? If Ziwei Imperial Palace were to join West Imperial Palace in marriage, who else could it be but the two of them? Futian was stunned as well. He didn't know quite how to continue the conversation for a while. Shichiao smiled and proceeded, "Of course, I thought not. That would make it too easy for you." The cultivators behind Shichiao looked at each other, and an old man whispered, "If the goddess disagrees, why bother telling others?" However, he immediately lowered his head and kept quiet after he said it. Indeed, his remark stunned Shichiao momentarily. She slowly turned around and focused her attention on the old man who spoke. Her face was a little red. "You talk too much," Shichiao said with temper in her voice. As the goddess, she still needed to keep her dignity. "I am sorry I spoke too fast." The old man explained, "What I meant was that if the goddess doesn't agree with the idea, there is no need to say it out loud." Shichiao stared at him. She could almost shoot fireballs from her eyes. Was this old B** deliberately trying to annoy her? If it were not because he was an elder, Shichiao would have already stabbed the old man with her sword. An alliance through marriage is not impossible, Futian piped up. Shichiao, stunned by this unexpected response, turned around and looked at Futian intently with those beautiful eyes of hers. Futian smiled and continued, "Now, there are many excellent young men at Ziwei Imperial Palace. My disciples, such as Fang Xiyuan, Duo Yu, and Tai Tu, have all survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. If there is someone that Goddess Chiyao or other outstanding ladies from the West Imperial Palace are interested in, I don't oppose them getting to know each other better." Shi Qiao was surprised as she stared at Yi Futian for a moment longer, then turned around to leave. Several people behind her also looked at Yi Futian with resentment. Stupid donkey. An old man couldn't hold himself back, either he was dumb or he was rude. Yi Futian watched them leave and had a look of innocuous confusion on his face. Did he say something wrong? Master. At this moment, a few people came running over this way, and it was his 4 little disciples. Of course, Fang Xiuan and the others were no longer little anymore. Out of the 4 junior protectors of Ziwei Imperial Palace, 3 had already survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. They were even stronger than the 4 original Great Protectors. You are back, Yi Futian commented. After Duo Yu and Tai Tu had both survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path, Yi Futian urged them to return to the village to visit the teacher and give him the news themselves as a sign of respect. The 4 agreed because the teacher was also their master. You were gone for a long time. Were you studying with the teacher? Yi Futian asked curiously. Little Ling pinched her mouth and replied, The 3 of them have no minds to study anything, as you know. After they visited the teacher, they slipped away from the village. Master, guess where they went? Where? Yi Futian showed a look of curiosity. Master, guess, Little Ling said. In front of Yi Futian, she was still acting like a little girl. Yi Futian laughed as he looked at them. There were only so many places they could go in the Shangqing domain. Domain Chief's Manor or Nanhai family? Yi Futian asked. Right on. Little Ling replied. The Shangqing Domain Chief's Manor had summoned all of the major forces to gather at the Domain Chief's Manor, and these 3 crashed their party. Just simply going to their party? Yi Futian pressed teasingly. Master, it's a bit more than that. We made some contributions. Fang Xian scratched his head, not quite forthcoming. Tai Tu, you tell me. Yi Futian looked at Tai Tu. We beat up some people and broke some of their stuff. Tai Tu hesitated. When Yi Futian heard him, he already had a picture in his mind. The chief of Shangqing Domain Chief's Manor has been disrespectful to the master and had several exchanges with the master in confrontations. If it weren't because of Donghuang Imperial Palace, we would have definitely not spared them of their lives. The same goes for the Nanhai family, as well as the Muyun family that married into them. Consider their betrayal of the village. We have been more than merciful not cleaning up all these trash, Duo Yu added coldly, feeling completely justified. Yi Futian glanced at Duo Yu and thought that he had always been the least talkative of the 4 of them. But Yi Futian knew that this had something to do with his childhood. He grew up without parents and was raised by the village. He had always had low self-esteem and was not the most outspoken. If it weren't because of Yi Futian who selected him, Duo Yu was fated to live an ordinary life. Among the 4 disciples, Duo Yu might be the one who was most grateful to him and cared the most about everything that happened to Yi Futian. As a result, he must have hated the Shangqing Domain Chief's Manor and the Nanhai family with a passion. What was done is done. Yi Futian didn't blame them. He understood the impetus behind his disciples' motivations. They were just trying to avenge him. I knew Master would not punish us, Fang Xiuan said with a smile. He was rewarded with a glare from Yi Futian. This guy was the biggest troublemaker of them all. Just as they were talking, the ground suddenly shook, and the buildings inside Ziwei Imperial Palace were shaking. It was as if a violent earthquake had just occurred. Yi Futian had a suspicious look on his face as his divine consciousness covered the boundless space. But he detected nothing unusual. He raised his head to look above the firmament. Was there someone here again? His eyes seemed to penetrate the endless void, looking at a place very far away. In the place beyond the heavens, an extremely brilliant divine light seemed to imprint into his eyes. What was that outside the Ziwei segmentum? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2656, Shocks to the 7 Realms. Chapter 2656, Shocks to the 7 Realms. A shock from outside the heavens. At this moment, everyone in the Ziwei segmentum could feel this rumble, and their hearts trembled along with it. Were they under attack again? By now, there had been a dark cloud hovered over them psychologically. However, they soon discovered that it was not an attack after all. They saw the glow above the firmament, which was endlessly radiant. It was terribly far away, and yet they could perceive it. One could imagine just how far and wide this glow's coverage was and how brilliant the light was. Otherwise, they would not have been able to see something so far away. What is happening? Countless people wondered. Futian didn't know what was happening either. Inside the Ziwei Imperial Palace, many people levitated into the sky as they looked higher into the heavens. All of them appeared surprised. "Palace Lord! Master!" Many people called out to Futian. "Come with me to take a look," Futian said, and a group of people moved along with him, heading outside the heavens. They were moving fast and shuttled through the void. It didn't take them long before they were outside of the bounds of the Ziwei segmentum. The glow had diffused and illuminated the boundless space, lighting up the space of void outside the Ziwei segmentum. Futian felt a peculiar aura. It seemed as if the space in the void was no longer a void and that the divine light, which continued to spread, seemed intent on illuminating and shrouding over the entire original realm. This, Futian felt something unusual. It seemed these strange visions were displayed. The original realm may be facing some drastic changes that have yet to come. Exactly what kind of power could have such an effect on the original realm? The original realm was a broken world resulting from the collapse of the heavenly path. It had an endless number of empty spaces. But now, this power seemed to be restoring the original realm. What kind of power was capable of such a terrifying effect? Futian walked towards the divine light. That area seemed to be expanding towards the original realm. The divine light, likewise, was growing as well. What a strong will of the great path! Lord Chen exclaimed. That extremely pure atmosphere of the great path astonishing even him. After a long time, they finally got a clue. The place where the divine light was spreading outward seemed to be a vast expanse of barren land with absolutely no signs of life, a veritable desert. In that desert landscape, there was an incomparable will of the great path that continued to spread outward, and it seemed to be a different will of the great path. That barren land was like the land from prehistorical times, primordial and greatly transmuted. Many magnificent buildings were resurrected in that barren land, including some impressive statues. What he saw in front of him greatly impacted Futian's senses. What place is this? The cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace couldn't help but marvel. Like a world from before our time, someone whispered. Many people agreed that the ancient aura seemed to be from long ago. The tombs of the gods. Futian murmured as it finally dawned on him what it was. No wonder he thought that it felt familiar. Once upon a time, he had seen it just that one time. That was over 100 years ago when they were in the 9 realms. Donghuang Imperial Palace had ordered Empty Imperial Palace to open up the gods' relics so that the premier figures from the 9 realms may enter. At the time, many people, including Xia Qingyuan, Yi Wuchen, and he had gone inside. There were many opportunities within, which Yaya and Xia Qingyuan had both obtained. Finally, when he received the inheritance of the great emperor, his vision seemed to have penetrated the space and saw the tombs of the gods. Presumably, it was everything that he was seeing before him. God's relic, also known as the tombs of the gods, whose entrance seemed to be controlled by Donghuang the Great, was located in the original realm. Now, the tombs of the gods had reappeared in the world. The tombs of the gods! The cultivators trembled when they heard Futian's words. Many of them had also heard of such a place before. According to legends, when the heavenly path collapsed in ancient times, a battle had erupted among all the gods. It was known as the Dusk of the Gods. In that battle, the heavenly path collapsed, and the gods perished. Countless years later, the world of today was formed. These tombs of the gods were the battleground where the gods fought in ancient times. Was this the place that all the gods were buried? In ancient times, the eruption of the battles among the gods caused the collapse of the heavenly path. The original realm was what was left of the former world and became known as the tombs of the gods. However, who was it that sealed off the tombs of the gods? Someone whispered with much curiosity. What was the reason for the battlefield of the gods to be sealed by itself after the heavenly path had collapsed, and why was it not a broken world? Or rather, had this ancient battlefield been formed all by itself? Of course, it was next to impossible to find an honest answer to any of these speculations. However, the appearance of the tombs of the gods had already given them the shock of their lives. It is possible that this was a well-preserved ancient world, Yi Futian whispered. They continued to move in that direction, feeling the atmosphere of the great path that spread towards the original realm. He guessed that this place might be left over from ancient times. What was known as the tombs of the gods was the battleground of the gods once upon a time, a primordial world. The tombs of the gods and the fall of the gods were just a way of indicating the event's occurrence. No wonder its aura of the great path was so pure, much purer than the aura of the great path in today's world. If one can cultivate and prove the way here, their divine wheel of the great path has to be perfect, Some Renhuang remarked, and Yi Futian nodded in agreement. Back then, when the people from the 9 realms had entered the god's relic, it was because they wanted to use the god's relic to enhance their Renhuang realm, casting the perfect divine wheel of the great path. The great path aura is spreading over the entire original realm. Perhaps it will shroud the original realm again, and the site of the ancient world may reappear once again in original realm? Someone wondered. If so, the original realm might become the major world of them all. All the major worlds would be coming to compete for a piece of the original realm. Of course, none of these were the main concerns at the moment. The original realm aside, just the reappearance of the tombs of the gods was enough to set the whole world abuzz. An unknown number of cultivators would indeed show up here soon. Perhaps, it would be another impending storm of blood and violence. At this time, Yi Futian and the others were approaching that area, but many other cultivators were also moving in that direction from different areas inside the original realm. The appearance of the tomb of the gods had covered the boundless space with endless divine light, which the entire Z-Way segmentum could see. It was the same at other places as well. Everyone who was cultivating in the original realm was rushing toward the direction where the tombs of the gods were located. At this time, in the Donghuang Imperial Palace of the Divine Prefecture, Donghuang the Great opened his eyes and said, "Let it be known that in the land of the original realm, the tombs of the gods have been opened, and tell the 18 domain chiefs manners to inform cultivators everywhere. At the same time, open up the passageways to the original realm so that all the cultivators may go there." This voice resounded throughout Donghuang Imperial Palace, and the vast domain of the Imperial Palace was trembling because of it. Many people, including top cultivators inside the Imperial Palace, had come out of their place of cultivation and looked in the direction where the voice was coming from. "You too go," said Donghuang the Great. Everything that happened inside the Imperial Palace did not escape his attention. "Yes, Your Majesty." One voice after another was heard replying as the cultivators of Donghuang Imperial Palace set out on their journey. At the same time, the news quickly traveled to all 18 domain chiefs' manners, then moved on to inform the entire Divine Prefecture. And it was not just limited to the Divine Prefecture, but also the other worlds. The reappearance of the tombs of the gods had electrified all 7 realms. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.